Question number 5, Dr. Parmjeet Parmar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Order. Dr. Parmjeet Parmar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. My question is to the Minister for Building and Housing. How does the Productivity Commission report support the direction of the government's reforms to improve the affordability of housing?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
The key message from the report is that the critical issue of land supply is undermining housing affordability. It notes that land prices have increased by 5-fold in the past 20 years and that this is largely due to regulatory failure. It argues that councils have imposed planning rules on both greenfield and brownfield developments without properly considering the flow-on costs. The Housing Accords and Special Housing Areas legislation was a short-term fix that has enabled 129 areas to be approved for housing outside the normal planning rules. This report will feed into the longer-term reforms, including a national policy statement on urban development and changes to the Resource Management Act.
Supplementary question, Dr. Parmjeet Parmar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. What is the Minister's response to the planning argument that tools like metropolitan urban limits are needed environmentally so as to ensure not too much of New Zealand's land area is used for urban purposes?
Mr. Speaker.
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the government considers these arguments are very weak. The Environment report out yesterday shows that only 0.8% of New Zealand land is used for urban purposes, despite it be accommodating 80% of the population. That area of land is growing at a rate that even by 2050, only 1% of New Zealand would be urban land. The idea that we must constrain our cities because we would use up all the land is a nonsense. There are some valid arguments over infrastructure as to why we want a mix of both greenfield and brownfield growth, but artificial metropolitan urban limits that just drive up house prices are flawed and should not be permitted.
The answers consistently from the Minister are far too long. Supplementary question, Dr. Parmjeet
Thank you, Mr.
Parmar.
Speaker. Does the Minister agree that Council's plans need to take into account economics and price signals as recommended by the Productivity Commission?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Yes. The Productivities Commission report recommends that where land prices are artificially high due to planning constraints, there should be a requirement for councils to open up new land. This is a radical shift from the current planning ethos, but one that needs considering in response to the substantive report.
A supplementary question, Julianne Genter.
Mr. Speaker, will he act on the Productivity Commission's recommendation to remove the Council's regulations that require an oversupply of car parking, given that they are a major driver of increased housing costs, as well as traffic congestion and pollution?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, the Productivity Commission report makes good points about things like parking requirements, about balcony requirements, about adding extra requirements over and above the Building Act. And what we need to understand is every time we put those sorts of rules in place, they undermine affordability, and that's why this report rightly recommends reform. I look forward to the Green Party's support for the report reforms backing up the recommendations from the Productivity Commission.
That's right. Point of order.
Point of order, Julianne Genter.
My question was, will he act on the recommendations?
The difficulty I had was actually understanding the question. I'll invite the member to ask the question again.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Will he act on the Productivity Commission's recommendation to remove onerous council regulations requiring an oversupply of car parking, given that they drive up the cost of housing and create traffic congestion and pollution?
The Honourable Dr. Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, it's more complex than the member presents because, of course, the parking requirements are not in the Resource Management Act. They are in the district plans that are put in place by councils. So what the government is planning to do through both a national policy statement on urban development as well as reforms to the RMA is to get the incentives right for councils to better take into the account the cost that these sorts of regulatory impositions put back onto homeowners.
Supplementary question, Julie Ann Genter.
Why didn't he act on this issue earlier, given that experts in the field and the Green Party have been raising these costly rules with the government since 2009 because they've been standing in the way of affordable medium-density housing around good bus and train routes?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
Mr. Speaker, quite the opposite. I've repeatedly seen the Green Party support metropolitan urban limits that, according to the Productivity Commission report, have actually been at the core of the problem around housing affordability. In respect of the parking requirements and in respect of brownfield developments, the special housing areas legislation is enabling us to bypass some of those stupid requirements. I note the Green Party vigorously opposed the special housing areas legislation.
Supplementary question. Supplementary question, Julie Ann Genter.
Can he confirm that, according to the recent report on housing by the Auckland City Chief Economist, removing the planning barriers to high-quality, medium-density housing development in the inner suburbs around bus and train routes, as the Green Party has been advocating for years, is the most effective way to create more affordable housing in Auckland, not removing urban limits?
The Honourable Dr Nick Smith.
This government is of a view that good quality intensification of housing is part of the answer. But the Green Party can't have it both ways. Take the heritage provisions that are blanketly applied Auckland that actually apply to many of the areas where there is the potential for greater apartment development, and I note that party has been opposing changes to those heritage requirements that actually get in the way of new houses and more affordable houses.
Point of order.
Point of order, Julie Ann Genter.
I seek leave to table a graph from this report which shows that removing urban boundaries is the least effective way to achieve housing affordability in Auckland.
The report, I presume, is easily available to members if they want to source it? Yes, they can. So I will not be putting the leave.
Point of order.
Point of order, Julie Ann Genter.
I seek leave to table a letter from myself and other traffic economists from the 30th of October 2009 to the Minister Nick Smith raising the costly issue of minimum parking requirements.
It may be of interest to members. I'll put the leave. Leave may be interested. Members may be interested. Leave us ought to table that particular letter. Is there any objection?
No, yes, there is. It's self-promotion material.
Order. There is objection.
Point of order.
Point of order, Julie Ann Genter.
I seek leave to table a letter from the 12th of August 2009 from the Honourable Stephen Joyce to myself denying that councils require businesses to provide car parking.
Leave us sought to table that particular letter. Is there any objection? There is none. It can be tabled. Question number 6, Eugenie Sage.